Hey guys, welcome back. So this is going to be part 4 on this Nissan Hanix N150-2 mini excavator. So in the first 3 videos, we picked this thing up off Facebook Marketplace, paid $2,000 for it, thought that was a pretty good deal, but when I got it home, this thing was a complete disaster. There were so many issues with it. To begin with, the idlers, the bearings on them were just completely shot. The swing motor and swing bearing were demolished. The gear was stripped out. The frame was cracked. So in the last video, we fixed that up along with replacing the slew bearing and gear. The paint was in really bad shape. You can see some of our old parts here that still haven't even been painted. You can see the condition of it. This stick boom is actually bent, so all this needs to be cut off. But we went ahead and fixed up all the linkages here. A lot of these joysticks were really sloppy, so we took all the play, or most of the play, out of those. We fixed this whole kingpin by putting a new center pin. We got new pins and bushings throughout all this as well. So we still have to tackle this engine, the final drives, all the boom parts, along with the dozer blade and bucket. Those need a tremendous amount of work. This cab needs tons of work as well. The bottom has some rust and rot, along with this door is really bent and warped, and it doesn't even close. So we need to fix all that up. We rebuilt all these hydraulic cylinders and got them painted, so they're ready to go on. We also need to address this track frame. That needs to be painted and cleaned up. But I think for now, we need to go ahead and get started on some of these boom parts. That way we can get all the hydraulic cylinders installed. So if you haven't seen the first videos on this, I will link them in the description. Be sure to check those out. As you can see, somebody really did a number on this thing. Looks like it took a huge mallet to it. You can see that that thing is pretty bent. It looks like this whole thing like ripped off or something, because they did a repair here and then welded this on the bottom, and it's the same thing on the other side. So I guess when they welded it back, they didn't weld it straight. This pin boss really needs to be cut out and a new one welded in. That way the bushings fit tightly. Alright guys, well that was a ton of work, but I really think it was worth it to put this new boss in here. The other one was just so wallered out that the bushings would have just fell out and started spinning in there. Eventually it would have just wore it out to where it's, you know, unusable. This boom was slightly bent, so I did bring this a hair back this way, and I think that is nicely in line. It still has a slight curve right here, but I don't think that really matters. I did strengthen it up with these flat plate bars that wrap all the way around, so that should be nice and strong. But I do want to go ahead and check the alignment of these faces here. Alright, so we're just going to check the alignment here with the face. Man, that is absolutely perfect. And there's like probably maybe 2/1000ths of a gap right there. So if I wanted to put a shim in there, I can. And also I could shim this area up too. And this other side is exactly the same. That is nice. That is perfect right there. I couldn't get it better if I wanted to. So the best way that I found to remove old bushings is to just weld a bead around the inside, and that will shrink it. I believe that one's out. Yep. Worked like a charm. There's our other bushing. All right, so we got the bushings in. Test the fit here. Oh yeah, that is nice and tight there. Test this other one. Alright, let's go ahead and get these seals installed. Alright, so these holes were just rusted out. So I'm going to try one of these nut certs, that's what they're called. So in the previous video, I had a couple people ask me what kind of paint I was using, and this is a single stage urethane enamel, and this paint gets mixed to 3:1, so you'll see your 3:1 scale right here. So if I put 2 parts paint, I'm going to fill the next part up to here with the hardener. So mix it to the 2 right there. We'll just mix it right there to the 2. Alright, well, I think that turned out pretty good. I went ahead and painted a couple other parts while I had the paint out as well. So I found this cool little stopper here that fits perfectly over this bolt, because before it was hitting metal on metal and messing that up there, but now it's perfect. Alright, so before we install these cylinders, I'm going to go ahead and put some new bushing seals in. There's our old seals. We got some new ones right here. You always want to make sure your seals are facing out. That way the grease doesn't push the seal out and also dirt can't get in. Let's get our grease fitting reinstalled. I did add some weld right here and ground it down. That way this has a nice tight fit there. I also added some weld on the boss over here to take out the play. A lot of play comes from these pins rocking in their bores. They're not supposed to do that because then they'll start wearing this out and there's no bushing in there. So you want these pins to be as tight as possible. Also, certain ones have bolts going through them and you want those bolts really tight so they don't move. I did pick up a new one of these nuts as well. The other one was completely stripped out, so I had to actually file some of the threads on this bolt as well. It was also extremely difficult to take the old nut off. I had to heat it up really hot in order to get it off. This one's going on nice. Alright, well I guess this is going to be a good test to see how well all this stuff lines up. All that lines up perfect. It's nice and solid too. Perfect. Well, this thing is finally starting to look like an excavator. So I did leave this part unpainted. I want to fit it with the thumb, so I'm gonna have to weld that on there. But before I can do that, I'm gonna have to start the engine up and move this boom up and down in the bucket to kind of get my measurements. Alright, so I just noticed that these pins that came with this bucket don't have a grease zert, because I guess they're meant for a quick coupler, which I will probably get in the future, but I'm gonna attempt to drill through these and add a grease zert. Got a little bit of this tap magic. Stuff works really good for tapping and drilling. so now we're going to tap this for a 1/8 pipe thread with my grandfather's tap handle that he made. He was a machinist with a Chicago steel company, and he made this himself. That's been kind of passed down to me. He's not alive anymore. And we're going to just tap this for a grease zerk. Alright, so I got that hole cleaned out. I'm going to measure the distance just by simply sticking this down in it. We are right here, so that's where we need to drill. Alright, let's put a small chamfer on this. Alrighty, there we go. And we got grease. This protective cover for these lines here. All right, go ahead and get these lines hooked up. Alright, got some new stainless steel hardware for these clamps. Buddy, you nice and cozy? You nice and cozy, buddy? You just hanging out in your little bed? Just hanging out in your little bed? It's my little buddy right there. Alright guys, so I went ahead and picked up a bunch of new parts here, and I also got some other parts that need to be installed as well. So I did pick up this new thumb. I'm hoping it's not going to be too small. This would probably fit my other smaller machine better, but I'm going to see if it works on this one. Hopefully it does. If not, then I'll just add it to my other machine. I picked up some new fuel line, hydraulic fittings, some insulation, some oil and filters. Also got some under the hood insulation, because as you can see, this old insulation is just falling apart. I want to get all that replaced. Also got some of this weather stripping on the way as well. Also picked up some new coolant hose, and this old coolant hose is probably okay, but since I'm going this deep into the machine, I figured this would be a good time to go ahead and replace it. That way I don't have to worry about it. So let's go ahead and get all this old coolant line removed. Also, we can go ahead and start working on this engine, get the valves adjusted, and get it completely serviced and all the fuel lines replaced as well. Yeah, so now I can see there was some pretty good wear spots, so I'm glad I'm replacing these. Man, look at all that rust in there. I'm so glad I'm changing those out. Alright, got this thing all cleaned up. Alright, before I tighten these clamps and run the other lines, I want to go ahead and replace all these fuel lines. That way they'll be easier to get to. Try and do this without breaking these fittings. Yeah, I'm glad I replaced these hoses because they're all really brittle and leaking as well. Wow, that line is just full of like nasty water and fuel. Some nasty stuff in there. Yeah, definitely need to be replaced. It doesn't look too bad. There is a bunch of junk down in there in the bottom. Like pine straw and stuff, leaves. Ooh. That thing don't look too good. Wow, that's really clogged up. So it looks like it was clogged up so bad that it was closing in on itself. However, anyway, it's really dirty. I think I have one of those filters. I'm not sure just yet. Yeah, see, there's a little O-ring on these that we can replace. Let's get the seal replaced. those reinstalled. Let's get this new fuel line ran. Alright, I went ahead and lined the hose in this protective lining. Alright. Alright, all our fuel lines are finished. Let's finish up getting these heater hoses done. Alright, so we got all these heater lines ran, along with all these fuel lines, got everything cleaned up, and installed a new filter. So let's go ahead and address the valves on here. When I first cranked this engine up, it sounded like the valves were out of spec because there was pretty good ticking sound. So I'm hoping that adjusting these valves will take care of that. There's some other things that we need to do. This belt is kind of loose, so that probably needs adjusted, and we still have to do an oil change on it as well. Alright, let's go ahead and see if we can get this alternator tightened up, because this belt is pretty loose. Alright, that should be a lot better. Well, those are pretty loose. Doesn't look too bad in there. It's got some black staining, but that's typical of a diesel engine. Yeah, those are definitely out of spec. There's a lot of play on some of these. So the specs on these valves is 0.25 millimeters. This feeler gauge is 0.254. It goes under it with tons of movement, so those are very loose, all of them. So let's get all those adjusted. Alright, so now we're just going to stick our feeler gauge under there. We're going to tighten it down until we have a little bit of resistance there. That should be it right there. Okay, my valve clearances keep changing after I rotate the engine. Usually I can just bring the valves up at top dead center. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and take this radiator off because there's timing marks on the front pulley, which I cannot see without removing that. Unfortunately, that's what I got to do. So let's get to it. guys, well, this thing is getting pretty close to getting started up. We went ahead and got the engine serviced, the valves adjusted, oil and filters changed. We also got some of these panels on and the hydraulic tank filled up and some other odds and ends. But before we get this thing cranked up, we need to go ahead and hook up these coolant lines to the heater assembly. This thing had tons of glass filled in it, and I think the motor was kind of locked up from all the glass that was in here. I got a lot of it out, but there's still a lot of it in there. I spent a long time trying to get all this glass out. You can see there's still a ton in there. There is our copper heater core. Alright, so while that paint's drying, let's go ahead and get some of these controls and other parts installed. Alright, let's go ahead and get these floorboards installed. I went ahead and got these coated in a permacoat spray and bed liner. It was pretty expensive. I figured it will hold up really well. I think it ended up costing around $150 to get these sprayed. Alright, I went ahead and cleaned this out. I put a little bit of muriatic acid in it and flushed it out. So that's flowing nice and freely. Hey, hey. You wanna go outside? You wanna go outside? You wanna go outside? Yeah. Come on, come on. All right, we got the heater all installed. Let's see if it works. Got 2 speeds on it. All right, that's cool. So one thing that I just found that I thought was pretty cool is, so this is your 2-speed pedal. Basically when you press this, it makes the track go faster. So this operates the PTO, just doing that. But if you press it a little bit more, it operates that pedal right there. And if you push this up, it locks it in place. So I think that's some kind of like high flow for if you have, for example, like a rotary mower or something on the PTO, or something that you need to spin a little bit faster with more flow. I believe that's what that is for. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm trying to think of the best way to go ahead and fix this Dozer blade. So the pinholes are pretty wallered out. So I'm thinking that the best way to fix it would be to just cut down this bushing in half and drill this out and just weld in the bushing. There's actually no grease zerks from the factory that grease this, so that's kind of one of the issues. So if I'm able to drill this, I might add a grease zerk as well. There's our little bushing. That definitely tightened that up a lot. Alright, let's get this blade temporarily installed. So instead of buying a new seat, I had the original seat professionally recovered. They added new burlap under here, new vinyl, and I think some new foam as well. The reason why I didn't get a new seat is because I did like how comfortable this one was. I guess with these springs under here, it really made it pretty comfortable, so I decided to keep it. Alright guys, so to finish hooking up this Dozer blade, I need to crank it up and drive it on some flat concrete. That way I can get the angle for the new cutting edge correct. I also have to extend the cylinder out to hook it up. I did go ahead and hook up a oil pressure gauge, so we'll test the oil pressure and that will give us a good indication how healthy the engine is. system, but cranked right up. Sitting at about 75 psi. That's pretty good. Alright, so far I'm not seeing any leaks or anything. Improvement that I already see is that before this dozer blade would, once you lift it up, it would automatically just drop right back down because there was a leak inside the center pivot and fluid was bypassing. So it's staying up fine and lifting the machine no problem. So I got a new cutting edge here, but you can see that this old blade, it is really warped out. I don't think I'm going to be able to bend it back straight. I'm not too worried about it. As long as the cutting edge is straight, that's all that really matters. So it looks like I'm going to have to cut some of the center out in order to make it work. That closed the gap up pretty good. Alright guys, well that was an insane amount of work. We went ahead and got this Dozer blade finished up. It's nice and solid, got a new cutting edge on it, got it kind of aligned and added some guards over the cylinders and braces. We also fixed up this bucket. The whole bottom was smashed in and it was just like falling apart. We also added new bucket ears on it, so this thing is really solid. There's like no movement in it. Before, this thing was just flopping around everywhere, but it is absolutely solid. There's like no play in this thing now. We also added this hydraulic thumb. However, we ran into one major issue with it. So before, when I was talking about this PTO pedal, I was talking about how whenever you press it down, it engages the high speed pedal. And I should have thought about it at that time that this is basically a one-way circuit. You can run like a rotary mulcher, a rotary cutter, anything with a motor on it you could run, or a jackhammer or something like that. That's probably what it's mainly for, is a jackhammer. So the fluid runs basically in a circle. So you have fluid going through the line here, and then it returns straight to tank through that one. What you need with a thumb is for these to basically reverse back and forth with the pedal, and this system does not do that. It will only run it one way, so the thumb will go up but it won't go back down. So there's a couple options I can do to fix that. One is to add a flow diverter, which basically will take the hydraulic power for this swing arm here, and it basically, with just a flip of a switch, you can either have hydraulic power to this arm or the thumb. And I do have spare wires here that lead to a switch right here, so that is a good option to do. There's a couple other ways. I can add a bi-directional valve, which would use these PTO lines and just have constant flow through them, and the valve will switch back and forth. But I think the best way would be to add a flow diverter valve using the hydraulics off that ram there. All right, so this is what is called a electronic flow divider. So basically the way this works is you have your pressure coming in here, and this solenoid acts which side you're going to use. So it takes one flow in and it can switch it to one implement or another implement. So to install it, I think I'm going to have to put it under these floor pans, so all this has to come back up. So I would really like to install the diverter valve in this area closest to these hydraulic lines. However, there's really no room in there to do that. So I got plenty of room right here, and I think the best spot to mount this is going to be right here. So I just picked up a couple hydraulic lines and some fittings. So let's go ahead and get these fittings on this diverter valve. Right, so these are our two return lines. These are going to be going back to our cylinder here. Alright, so now we got to extend these pressure lines here. get some covers on these hoses. Alright, so I'm gonna get rid of these flimsy little wires on this plug. I'll add a nice new plug on it. Let's get these old wires out of here. It also has a little sealing washer in there too, and it won't seal with the old wires in there. So now we have this rubber sealing washer in here that we can tighten down on this cable so it will be completely waterproof now. Alright, so now we got all the hoses ran, got it mounted. So let's go ahead and hook up the electrical plug. I think we'll be ready to test this thing out. Alright, so that works absolutely perfect. This thing moves up and down nice and free, and whenever I flip the switch, it will change in between the swing boom or the thumb, so I don't see any leaks or anything. So if any of you guys were ever thinking about adding auxiliary hydraulics to your machine, it's pretty simple. Just get one of these diverter valves and some hoses and a switch, and you're good to go. So I'll probably end up cleaning these up and getting some quick couplers. I'm also going to route them a little bit differently so they're not all out here. But it's also nice that I can use the original auxiliary hydraulics. So if I ever wanted to run a mulcher head or a hammer or a rotary cutter or something like that, I have that option along with the option of the thumb. So I think it's about time to go ahead and start working on this cab. Before I move this thing or do anything to it, I want to go ahead and take all this glass out. So to take this glass out, we just have this small piece that we pull out here. Oh, that went really smoothly. Alright, here's one of my missing rollers. It actually looks like the other one's down in here as well. Awesome. So this channel was getting all scratched up and the door was wobbling around because it didn't have the rollers connected to it, which go right here on the end of the door like that. Well, it looks like we had a couple nests up here. Some more egg remnants in it. Alright, so we got all the glass and locks and everything off this door. So now you can really see how warped this door is. So up here it's completely closed. Down at the bottom, man, this thing is really warped. Our gaps here look decent. When we get down here at the bottom, it's like literally overlapping. Might be better for me to just build a new frame and just build a whole new door. But I'm gonna try and salvage this one. And if I can't do that, I'm just gonna build a whole new door for it. All right, well that was a ton of work, but we finally got this cab pretty much finished. We finally got it all painted up. All this turned out pretty good. I don't know if you remember, but all of this was rusty. There was a lot of holes in here, and there was also another top, which I don't think I'm gonna use. I kind of like it more simple without the added top up here. So let's go ahead and start getting some of the accessories put on it. So I also have some of this insulation heat matting. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Alright, let's get these rubber isolators on here. Sure is hot out here, huh? Cooling off by the fan, bud? Alright, so we finally got the cab installed, and I think that turned out pretty well. Everything is bolted down nicely. We got the rubber strip under there to keep some of the vibrations down. So I did do a lot of other things off camera. One being, I went ahead and took the factory seat out, even though I had it recovered. I really wanted some armrests on it, so I went ahead and installed this seat. And by doing that, I had to extend this throttle lever out so it wouldn't hit. So I just had to weld up a bar there, and now it won't hit the armrest. So let's go ahead and get some of the odds and ends put on here. That way we can go ahead and get the glass and the doors on. Let's get this air cleaner installed. So this is actually the intake, and it goes up through the frame as like a snorkel. So that's pretty cool. thing closes so much better than before. Before, this door wouldn't even close at all. Alright, let's go ahead and add a door handle to this thing. Alright, so I went ahead and got all the electrical wires hooked back up, ran some new lines. Let's go ahead and install a new dome light here. Alright, so I got some new glass panels made, so let's go ahead and get those installed. I'm just gonna put some sealant in this weather stripping here. So all this old glass is pretty dirty. There's some overspray on it. Also, all this trim has all this old paint on it, so that's probably going to be a nightmare to get off. Alright, so I think I'm just going to use some paint stripper and some sandpaper, and hopefully that will take all this off. I was thinking about just painting this weather stripping, but I didn't really like the look of it. It just gave it a kind of cheap look. Alright, well that took forever, but we got the glass and all the trim cleaned up. I think that turned out actually really good. I went ahead and put some tire shine on it to kind of protect it. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Alright, so now we have this T-lock trim that we got to install. That tire shine seemed to actually help out a pretty good bit. Well, it just started pouring down on me. Gotta get a new chop. That can't be good. So I went ahead and picked up one of these trim installation tools. So let's go ahead and get this started first. Slide it in there. Slide it over like that. Work this in here. Push this forward. Alright, so we got most of the glass finished up, except for the front door here. I'm still waiting on the glass for that. So while that's coming in, let's go ahead and install some lights on this machine. So I went ahead and added a 12-volt accessory plug, and I also ran the wires for a little push button switch here, and we're going to use that for our front lighting. So we have our wires here. Let's go ahead and add this mounting plate. Alright, got one of these little pod lights. So I also have these two wires coming out of the roof here, and they go down to this switch. So let's put some lights up top. All right, so about $800 later, we got some new tracks. These are made by Sun. I have no idea if that's a good brand or not, but these actually look like pretty decent tracks. So these old tracks, the tread on it was still pretty good. However, these have a big crack right in it there, and you know, they got a little bit of dry rotting. These still probably would have lasted a pretty good while, but they actually ride pretty rough. So if you notice on these tracks, they have a bigger lug right here. And if you look right here, there's a space for a lug right in the center. So I need one with more lugs in order to fit in this area. These tracks fit, but they're really the wrong kind, I believe. And so if you notice with these tracks, the lugs are much closer together, so they should fit in the center like they're supposed to. And they should also ride a lot smoother the way they have these smaller lugs, and they don't have that basically double the size lug like on the old tracks. So these new tracks are 230 by 48 by 66. 230 is the width of the track in millimeters. The 48 is the actual pitch between the lugs, and the 66 is actually how many lugs the track has. So this track has 66 lugs, and you can see on this track it's 230 by 96 by 33. So this one actually has 33 lugs. So on the new track, it should fit in every sprocket hole. This one basically fits in every other sprocket hole. All right, so to loosen these tracks, we have to undo this grease fitting here. We should be able to get those off. Alright, so while we got the tracks off, let's go ahead and drain the final drive fluid. So one of my subscribers, who also has a YouTube channel, sent me a sweet set of these picks. I appreciate that, Diamond M. Okay, it's a little dark, but it's not too bad. Well, that's not good. This one don't have no fluid in it. Just a little bit. That's all we were able to get out of there, which is not much at all. But at least I don't see any metal or any glitter in there, so that's good. So I did flush this one out a good bit. like we have a pretty massive boulder under there. There we go. So I used to use aluminum foil to like wrap around my cylinders to mask them off, but this Glad press and seal stuff works amazing. If you need to mask something off, so it's just sticky enough to go around stuff and it will stay, and then it comes off really easily. Let's get these tracks installed. Back it up the other opposite way a little bit. Keep going. Oh, right there. That's good, thank you.
That's not yet.
Hold on. Hey, back it up just a little bit. Oh, hold on. A little bit more. Back. Forward. Alright, so we got the tracks installed and they seem to fit a whole lot better than the old tracks did. So as you can see right here, it's a much better contoured face here. So unlike on these old tracks, you can see this face is longer and then there's a sharp change here. So the new track should be a much smoother ride than these old ones. Also, each sprocket tooth is in each one of these holes, and unlike on these other tracks, they were only in every other hole. So the new track should work a whole lot better than these. Alright, so our glass came in for this door. Let's get some of this weather stripping on here. Alrighty, here's the last piece of glass. Alright, there we go. Alright, hopefully that don't break. Oh yeah. Alright, so we got one more thing to add to this cab, and that is a little fan. So I added this accessory plug, so we can just plug that in there. That'll be nice right there. This thing moves all around, so you change it. Oh yeah, it puts out a lot of air. Alright, let's go ahead and get this hood on. By the way, this hood was a tremendous amount of work. This thing was a complete disaster. It was all rusted through in various spots. But I think we got it fixed up pretty nice. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Alright, so we got the hood installed and pretty much everything else is done. So I did order a whole set of decals for this machine. We had all the warning stickers, all the side stickers, and everything else to go on here. I've been waiting for those to come in for about a month now, and I just got a notification saying that they were lost in shipping. They were coming all the way from Britain, I believe, so that's kind of unfortunate. So right now we only have these two decals. I bought these a long time ago when I first got the machine. It's kind of unfortunate that we don't have the rest of the decals, but we're just gonna have to make these work for the sake of getting this video out. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing greased up, and then we'll take it for a spin. All right, so this property over here, that has all been sold. I used to have a road going through here and out, but since I can't use that anymore, I'm gonna have to make a road through here. So let's go ahead and pluck some of these trees out. That way we can go ahead and get it prepped for a road coming out here. So it looks like all my welds have been holding up just fine. Well, let's go ahead and give this grading bucket a try. This thing is definitely going to put a lot more strain on everything, so that will be a good test. All right, so we got everything smoothed out and packed down. Now all I gotta do is just go ahead and top coat it with some gravel, but I'm gonna wait to do that. I still have to burn a lot of stuff and clear some other stuff as well. But for the most part, the little road is done. So that turned out pretty good. But as far as this thing goes, this thing actually performed pretty well. I really don't have any complaints with it. I mean, we pretty much rebuilt this thing from the ground up, so it's kind of a new machine here. But I mean, no issues have popped up. I do have one very small leak coming from this quick coupler, so I'll just go ahead and pull that off and get it plugged right there. No big deal. The hydraulic oil is still on the full mark, so it's a very slow leak. But the tracks performed flawlessly. I didn't have any tracks pop off or anything like that. All the controls, boom, cylinders, all those work great. The thumb works really good. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. My welds have held up pretty good so far. The bucket is still solid. You know, all the bushings and pins, all those are good to go. I really like the lighting on this. I was using this thing at nighttime and it really just lit up the whole area. I do wish I would have got the other decals because, you know, it only has those two on it. I would have liked to put some decals on the side here and maybe on the back hood, but I can still get those later on. So yeah, I mean, everything is working great on this thing. I really like the seat with these added armrests. Those work great. Even though this thing doesn't have air conditioning, that little fan puts off a good bit of air, so it kept me cool in here the whole time. And it's definitely pretty hot and dry out. This dirt is like dust. But yeah, I'm not seeing any other leaks or anything. All the final drives, all that stuff works good. The 2-speed, it works great, and it goes pretty fast with that. So a lot of you guys are probably wondering how much I have into this machine, and I don't know exactly. So I paid $2,000 for the machine itself. I got new tracks, I got a new swing bearing, all new seals and all that for the cylinders, paint. There was a lot of things I bought for this. I would have to say that I probably have about $5,000 in just the parts for it. So in total, I would say I probably have $7,000, maybe $8,000 total into it. Please post in the comments what you guys think I can actually get for this machine if I go to sell it, which might actually happen because all this land across the street here, that's 12 acres, and we are in the process of purchasing that. So we might end up building a house and a shop over there. I'm not quite sure just yet, but I will need a much larger excavator than this one. I might keep it, I do like it, but I do need a larger excavator. So you might see this in some more videos. I still have a lot of projects I need to do. I have a lot of projects over here along with building a new shop. If I do build a new shop over there, or if I build one over here, I'm not sure exactly just yet. So this Mitsubishi K3B engine seemed to run pretty good. It's definitely a whole lot quieter than it was before. Now that we've added this insulation under here, this thing just chugged along with no issues. So this thing definitely got pretty dirty and dusty, so it will need a good wash. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate just rebuilding this thing and then getting it all dusty like this, but I can clean it up pretty easy. I really like the basically rhino lining I did on these floor panels. That's holding up really well. So alright guys, I think I'm gonna go ahead and end this video here. This thing has been a huge project. It's definitely taken a long time, especially just waiting on all the parts to get here, but it's finally done. So as always, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on this project, and I will see you guys on the next one. So y'all take care. Later.